Hello, Fort Mill. My name is Mr. Young, your career development facilitator, and I'm excited to give you this great presentation tonight. With us tonight, we have our good friend, Mr. Joseph Miller, the VP of Enrollment Management and Marketing at Winthrop University. Mr. Miller, how are you doing tonight?
Thank you, Mr. Young, and thanks everybody at Fort Mill High School. Thank you so much for this invitation. We're looking forward to a great evening today.
Yes, sir. We are talking all things FAFSA, and I know there have been a lot of changes and there might be some confusion, some things, but we want to help you make sure that you have all the appropriate information. So Mr. Miller is going to go through a very extensive, detailed presentation that will tell us a lot about the ins and outs. Of course, if you have questions, go ahead and type them into the chat box, and I'll be able to get Mr. Miller to do that, okay? So without further ado, Mr. Miller, you ready for us?
Yes, sir.
All right. So you just pull up your slide deck and we'll get it going.
You bet. Well, as I set this up, everyone, thanks again for the invitation to present the updates to the financial aid and federal financial aid process this year. So if you give me just a second, then I will share my screen and we'll get going.
As a Winthrop alum, I'm always glad to put Winthrop at the forefront. So we really, really appreciate this partnership.
Okay, Mr. Young, can you all see my screen?
Yes, sir. We are good to go.
All right. Well, thank you again, everyone. It's an honor to give this update on federal financial aid this evening. And again, my name is Joseph Miller. I serve as Vice President for Enrollment Management and Marketing at Winthrop University. In my role, I have the distinct pleasure of working with our Office of Admissions, our Office of Financial Aid, and our Office of Communications and Marketing at Winthrop University. And I am presenting tonight, certainly as a representative of Winthrop University, but more importantly, I'm presenting tonight as a representative of the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators. You see that logo down in the bottom left-hand corner that says NASFA. Just to kind of give you a sense of what NASFA is the second largest intercollegiate organization, second only to the NCAA, the National Collegiate Athletics Association. And what NASFA does is NASFA is the national organization that makes sure that all colleges and universities are putting together financial aid packages that are consistent, that are equitable, and basically that we're all playing by the same set of rules. So what we're going to cover tonight not only applies to Winthrop University, but pretty much applies to any other college or university that you're going to be applying to in your college search, because the methodologies that we use to put together financial aid, the tools and resources and systems that we put in place are going to be consistent against all other NASFA institutions. So here's the roadmap of where we're going to go tonight. First, we're going to talk about what is financial aid. Financial aid can be a tricky and wiggly subject. So we want to unpack what financial aid actually is, how it impacts you, and how this applies towards your funding, your college or university experience. To unpack financial aid, we're going to talk about three other concepts in bullet points 2, 3, and 4. First, we're going to talk about the cost of attendance. Cost of attendance is all of the direct expenses and indirect expenses. We're going to unpack that so that you understand what a cost of attendance is as an institution. Next, we're going to talk about the Student Aid Index, and that's going to be the metric by which colleges and universities determine how much money you need in order to attend a college or university. And then next, we're going to talk about financial need, which is a subtraction of the way that cost of attendance is applied with the Student Aid Index that helps to determine what your financial aid package is. And then we'll talk about the category, types, and sources of financial aid. And then after that, what we're going to do is take a quick, maybe just a minute intermission, just so people can kind of stretch, stand up, stretch their legs, see if there's any questions. And then we'll jump back in to the second half of the presentation and talk about the free application for federal student aid, the FAFSA, and then wrap up the conversation with a discussion of special and unusual circumstances before we open the floor to any questions and concerns. And we'll have plenty of time to cover all this material. So let's jump on in. First, let's define what financial aid is. Now, when sometimes in having conversations with students and families, we may have conversations like, a parent may say, well, I'm interested to see what kind of financial aid my son gets, but I'm not interested in taking out loans. Or, I'd love to see what scholarships or grants are available, but I'm not interested in taking out financial aid. What those two examples illustrate is that sometimes families mistake what financial aid is. They think that financial aid is just loans, or they think that maybe scholarships and grants are something different from financial aid. But here's the definition of what financial aid is. Financial aid consists of funds provided to students and families to help pay for post-secondary educational expenses. So essentially, any money that you get to help pay for college or your university experience that doesn't come directly from your savings account, checking account, wallet, purse, pocketbook, whatever, any money that you get in the form of a grant, a scholarship, a loan, that is considered financial aid. The next topic that we want to cover is cost of attendance. So now that we understand what financial aid is, what is cost of attendance? Well, cost of attendance is what makes every institution a little bit different in the way that they advertise their price. Think of this as like the MSRP on a vehicle. So the sticker price when you purchase a car. So the cost of attendance includes your tuition and fees. So what you pay as far as tuition for taking classes plus the fees. Housing and food. So if you live on campus, you're going to have room charges and a meal plan charge. But it also includes books and supplies, transportations, and other miscellaneous items like, cost for a personal laptop computer, or else if you need dependent childcare expenses. All of these are considered part of the miscellaneous and personal expenses that factor into the cost of attendance. Now, just to kind of draw a distinction here, when students and families are looking at what the cost is to attend a college, most of the time, colleges and universities will only advertise the direct costs, which are tuition and fees and housing and food. So those tuition and fees and housing and food, those first two icons at the top, those are called your direct costs. And then those other three icons at the bottom, books and supplies, transportation, and miscellaneous and personal, are called indirect costs. But cost of attendance total is combined by adding your direct cost, tuition and fees, housing and food, with the indirect costs, books and supplies, transportation, miscellaneous and personal. And the reason why financial aid offices do that is because when we put together your financial aid to attend a college or university, we want to make sure that you have not only enough money to attend to cover those direct costs, tuition and fees, housing and food, but also those other indirect costs like books and supplies and transportation. So that's where your financial aid package is going to start, by a combination of direct costs and indirect costs so that you understand your total cost of attendance. All right, moving along. The next concept we're going to talk about is the Student Aid Index. Now, what the Student Aid Index is it's the amount of money that's calculated from the federal government when you complete your FAFSA that helps to determine the student contribution and the parent contribution of how much money you will need in order to attend a post-secondary institution. So basically, it's an approximate calculation of the financial resources that are available to send one member of the family to college for 1 year. And this is calculated by the information that you provide on the FAFSA. So just to recap, we talked about what is financial aid, we talked about cost of attendance, and we've talked about what the Student Aid Index is. It's a measure of how much a family can afford reasonably to send a member of the family to college for 1 year, and that number is calculated by completing the FAFSA, which we'll go into detail later. So let's switch to that fourth bullet point. What is financial need? This is the fourth concept that we want to cover tonight. So if you have a good understanding of what is financial aid, what is the cost of attendance, and what is the Student Aid Index, financial need makes a lot of sense. And I'll illustrate it with an example here in a minute. But every institution that's a NASFA institution calculates financial need using the same formula. So each institution takes their cost of attendance, again, direct costs and indirect costs, including tuition and fees, housing and food, books and supplies, miscellaneous, transportation, and then subtracts out the Student Aid Index. So your student index may be $2,000 or $5,000 or maybe $10,000. That's then calculated off of the cost of attendance, and whatever is left over equals your financial need, and that determines how much financial aid that you'll get. Let me illustrate this with an example. Let's say you have three different institutions, Institution 1, Institution 2, and Institution 3 on the far right. So you have three different costs of attendance at Institution 1, Institution 2, and Institution 3. And then you have what should say Student Aid Index, but it says expected family contribution. Imagine that that's your student aid index. So that includes how much you can reasonably afford to send a member of family to college for 1 year. And then on the far right is the need variable when you add the student aid index, your expected family contribution, into the cost of attendance. And so as you'll see, that produces three different need variables, X, Y, and Z. So let's call the first institution a public flagship in-state institution. Let's call institution 2 a public 4-year institution, and then institution 3 is a 2-year technical college. So the total cost of attendance at institution 1 is the most expensive over the second and the third. The second institution is a little bit more expensive than the 2-year technical college. And then institution number 3, the 2-year technical college, is the least expensive of them all. So if you apply your expected family contribution, your student aid index, into each of those cost of attendance, then you get 3 different variables. You get 3 different values of how much money you will get in order to attend each of those institutions. So at the first institution that's most expensive, you'll get the most financial aid because that covers the difference of your need. Whereas at the second institution, your financial aid will be a little bit less because a lower cost of attendance. And then at the third institution, the 2-year technical college, you'll get enough financial aid, but it won't be as much as you get at the other 2 institutions because the cost of attendance is lower at that institution. So the only difference in these models, it's not the student aid index or the expected family contribution, because that will stay the same. That's the constant in this equation. What makes the difference is the amount of the cost of attendance at those institutions, and that's what drives the difference in the financial aid packages. So what does a financial aid office do? The major function of a financial aid office is to take all of those formulas that we just talked about, using the methodology for financial aid, the cost of attendance, the student aid index, or the expected family contribution, to determine financial need. And we determine aid eligibility using that formula. It's the same formula that every NASFA institution uses. And then we package aid depending on the availability of funds that are available, both institutional aid and scholarships, state aid, federal aid. And then we send award notifications to students and families that include information about the amount of the award for each program for which a student receives, the disbursement methods and the time frames, meaning when you get your money and how you got and when it's applied by semester for the fall semester and the spring semester, and then the terms and conditions of each award, meaning what you need to do in order to keep your financial aid. And there's 2 different categories of financial aid that institutions deliver and also that students receive. And we think of them really in 2 big buckets. So the bucket on the left, the blue bucket, is need-based aid, and the bucket on the right is non-need-based aid. And we're going to talk about those as we go through the different types of financial aid that can be awarded to you. So need-based aid is information or is financial aid that's awarded to you based on that need formula that we just saw. Cost of attendance minus student aid index equals financial need. Non-need-based aid is financial aid that's awarded on the basis of something else, like academic merit or athletic merit or fine and performing arts. And we'll take a look at that later. So first, looking at the different types of financial aid. There's 4 major types of financial aid that fall into 2 categories of gift aid and self-help aid. The types of gift aid include scholarships, grants, and self-help aid include the 2 categories of work study and employment and loans. And we're going to take each one of these apart one at a time. But first, let's understand the source of financial aid. There are 5 major sources for where money for attending college comes from. And going around this circle from the top 12 o'clock position clockwise is the federal government, states, colleges and universities, private sources, and employers. And we'll take each one of these one at a time. First, the federal government. The federal government involves the largest source of financial aid, and this is what is funded through Congress, through your tax dollars, and this is what is delivered as federal financial aid when you complete the FAFSA every year. So receiving federal aid, it's provided primarily based on financial need, again, using that model that we looked at before, cost of attendance minus student aid index equals financial need. Students must apply each year using the FAFSA, which is what we're going to talk about later on this evening. And there's different eligibility requirements that must be met in order to receive federal aid from the federal government. Some of the federal aid programs that are awarded through financial aid offices include, if you're reading from the top left down across this matrix, from left to right include the federal Pell Grant, the federal Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grant, the Teacher Education Assistance for College and Higher Education Grant, also known as the TEACH Grant, if you plan to be a future educator. Also programs like Federal Work Study, the Federal Direct Student Loan Program, and Federal Plus Loans. Now, spoiler alert, just want to let you know, as part of tonight's presentation, you will be able to access a toolkit of lots of different wonderful worksheets and resources and materials that will be available to you from Mr. Young that include resources like a financial aid glossary, a summary of the financial aid programs, a cost of attendance comparison, a financial aid checklist. And so if you need to reference any of those materials tonight, you will have access to all of those, including this slide deck, in that toolkit. So don't feel like you've got to take copious notes, because you're going to get access to a lot of really great resources to help you after tonight's presentation. All right, back to the presentation. So we've talked about the federal government as a source for financial aid. Now let's talk about states. So state requirements usually require a residency. You have to be a resident of the state in which you live in to qualify for state aid. Aid may be provided based on both merit and need. And we'll take a look at that, especially for the way that that's applied in South Carolina. The state can also use information from the FAFSA and or their own state aid applications. And of course, deadlines can vary by state. So let's take a real deep dive, closer look at what's available for South Carolina scholarships. So if you are a South Carolina resident, the Office of Admission at your institution will also review you for the South Carolina state scholarships like Hope, Life, and Palmetto Fellows. These scholarships range from anywhere from $2,800 to $6,700 for the freshman year, and the Life and Palmetto Fellows scholarships can be renewed each year. The Hope Scholarship is a freshman-only award, but students who meet the academic criteria have the chance to earn the Life Scholarship in future years. The only difference to remember is that at technical colleges, they don't have the Hope Scholarship. The Life Scholarship is what it's called there, and the requirements are a 3.0 GPA. So it's best for you to check with the Commission on Higher Education website to make sure that you're checking the box on all the requirements based on the college type. Something that was new for a couple of years ago and continues into this year is that students can have up to 3 years of the Life Scholarship at a technical college, which was previously limited to 2 years, if you're working on an associate's degree that exceeds 68 credit hours. Technical colleges have the LTAP, the Life Tuition Assistance Program, to help students, to help with tuition assistance. It's the Lottery Tuition Assistance Program, for students who don't qualify for a state scholarship. Four-year colleges get their lottery funds as state scholarships only. And again, there's more details on this on the Commission on Higher Ed website. Also, just a couple of notes here. Starting a couple years ago in fall 21, it's continuing into this year, Palmetto Fellows can now be used at a technical college. Also, private colleges have access to South Carolina tuition grant students can apply for, and they should reach out to, if you are interested in this, reach out to your private college for more details. And there's also a state scholarship enhancement for students who major in qualifying math or science majors. These enhancements can only be awarded in your sophomore year and beyond, but we definitely want to mention this as you're thinking about entering your freshman year, because your freshman year outcome is what determines your eligibility for the enhancement. So not only must you be in an eligible major and meet the renewal criteria for the Life or Palmetto Fellows Award, which you receive, you must also earn at least 14 hours of math or science credit in your freshman year alone, which is that first checkbox to make sure that you complete 14 hours. If you do not meet this criteria in your freshman year, you cannot be considered for the enhancement again in the future. So majors that are eligible for state scholarship enhancements for math and science for years 2 to 4 depend on the college and the university for which you're applying. But the second checkbox shows just some examples of some of those different qualifying majors. And we definitely encourage state scholarship recipients who are in a qualifying math or science major to keep the hours requirement in mind as you're registering for classes from year to year. All right, moving along, colleges and universities. So when you apply to a college or university, one of the very first offers of financial aid you're going to get is through the college or university for which you apply. So this aid is provided based on both merit and financial need. So a lot of times colleges and universities are looking at your GPA, your ACT scores, your SAT scores, your letters of recommendation to determine your eligibility for financial aid. Also, the aid may be gift or self-help aid. So they may take criteria into consideration that includes your financial need that's calculated from the FAFSA as well as your GPA. And you can either get it as a gift, meaning a grant or a scholarship, which does not have to be repaid. Also, colleges and universities definitely use information from the FAFSA. And then finally, deadlines and application requirements vary by institution. So one of the research resources that you have in the toolkit is a financial aid checklist that helps you keep track of and manage some of the deadlines and applications for colleges that you may be applying to this year or next year. All right, we're moving right along. Just got a few more slides. Private sources. Now, here's something that a lot of families aren't really familiar with, but it's one of the resources that I really encourage students and families to check out, because private sources are a wonderful resource for funding and providing assistance for college and university expenses. And most of these are gift aid. They do not have to be repaid. So private sources can be foundations, businesses, churches, civic and charitable organizations. Also, deadlines and application procedures vary. Sometimes these private sources have application deadlines anywhere between November to April in an academic year. So begin researching private sources early. And in that toolbox of materials is some information on how to apply for private scholarship sources. There's some free national searches out there like fastweb.com. And it's just like it sounds, fastweb, FASTWEB.com. It's a free scholarship search engine. Also, agencies like Big Scholars through the College Board. Also, Niche, NICHE, is another great resource for checking out private scholarships. But I would recommend just going into your school counselor's office and asking what is available locally, because a lot of times local scholarships or local agencies will have funding that's available for graduating seniors year over year, and that will increase your chances of getting accepted for one of those private sources. Okay, last slide before the intermission is employers. So mom, dad, check this out. Your human resource office may have tuition courtesy benefits that are available to you or your dependent children based on your employment. So definitely have a conversation with your HR department to see if there are tuition courtesy benefits or scholarship benefits that you as the parent may be eligible to use on behalf of your dependent child who's going to college. One of the obvious sources for this is the U.S. military. So VA benefits is a huge area of employee benefits where you can get VA benefits and pass those along to students. I'll just speak for Winthrop's case. We are a yellow ribbon institution. We take great care of our vets, and most of the time, all you have to do if you're a vet or an active duty personnel is to provide a copy of your DD 214 if you're retired, and a copy of your certificate eligibility, or if you're active, just provide a copy of your active duty orders and pass that along to your college that you're applying to, and they will start the process of helping you apply for VA benefits. So with that, friends, as promised, I went through that pretty quickly. In the first 20 minutes, we just want to take a quick intermission, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment just to see if there are any questions in the chat. This would be a great opportunity if you need to stand up, stretch your legs. We're going to jump into about another 20 minutes worth of presentation, and then we'll be able to fully engage with any questions or answers at the end of it. But just want to see if we've got any questions in the chat, or if anybody wants to come off mute to see if we have any questions. I'll be glad to answer for you before we jump into the second half of our presentation.
Mr. Miller, I got to tell you, this is so insightful and enlightening. Thank you very much. You are doing a great job because there are no questions. So you keep on doing what you're doing, my brother.
All right. Sounds great. Well, folks, feel free to stand up and walk around as we jump into the second half. I'll get back into sharing my screen, and we'll get back into it. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, sir. We can see your screen.
All right, fantastic. Sorry for the delay. All right, folks, intermission is over. So now we are going to kind of just do a quick run through of where we've been. So we have talked about financial aid, check. We have talked about the cost of attendance, check. We have talked about the student aid index, check. We have talked about financial need, check. And we've also unpacked the categories, types, and sources of financial aid, check as well. So now we're going to cover these last two bullet points, which include the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. And then we'll wrap it up by talking about any special circumstances, because the reality is every family situation is totally different. I like to say at Winthrop University, we've got about 5,000 undergraduate students and 5,000 different types of financial aid packages that are out there. No two are the same. This is where your unique circumstances and your unique situation helps determine what kind of financial aid package you're going to receive from a college or university. So here we go. Let's talk about the FAFSA. All right, so first things first, before you jump into the FAFSA, there is a way to go ahead and determine on an estimated basis how much financial aid you think you may get by using the Federal Student Aid Estimator. What this does is it gives an early estimation regarding your student aid index and your possibility to receive Title IV federal aid. All it requires is some demographic information, information on your income, and asset information. And you can kind of click and use this link that's on the page, https://studentaid.gov/aid estimator. If you've got your cell phone or your smartphone up there, if you want to take a quick picture of that, feel free to go ahead. But it'll also be included in the slide deck for this evening as well. And this is just an easy way to kind of get into using the FAFSA and to get a sense of what aid you may qualify for. All right, next is a full discussion on the free application for federal student aid, also known as the FAFSA. What the FAFSA does is it collects demographic and financial information on students and families. So one thing to point out here is that the FAFSA is the student's application. It is technically for the undergraduate student, even though parents are going to be the ones who predominantly provide their information for students who are dependent on their parents. Now, there is also a calculation for students who are independent, but for most students graduating out of high school who were sitting and listening to this conversation and this presentation, just know that it's the student's application, but mom and dad, you're going to need to sit down and help your student fill out this application. Moving on to the second bullet point, it uses information used to calculate the student aid index, which we looked at earlier. We're going to take a deeper dive in later. Colleges will use the student aid index and the information from the FAFSA to offer the financial aid package, again, using that same formula that we looked at earlier. Cost of attendance minus student aid index equals financial need. And then finally, the FAFSA is available both in English and in Spanish. All right, a couple of things to keep in mind. There's been some recent changes in the open date of the FAFSA. The FAFSA may be filed at any time during an academic year, but typically no earlier than October 1st, prior to the academic year for which the student requests aid. And that has typically been the rule for the past couple of years, is that the FAFSA would become available on October the 1st. However, this year, Congress has implemented a FAFSA simplification that is going to make completing the FAFSA significantly and substantially easier for students and families. But that means that the launch date for the FAFSA has been delayed until December. So for the 24-25 academic year, that's this next academic year for which we're entering, the FAFSA may be filed starting in December 2023. However, the exact date has not yet been determined, but we know that it will definitely be before the end of December this year. And again, this is where you just want to double check the FAFSA priority dates and deadlines with colleges and universities that you may be applying to. Now, every college and university realizes that the FAFSA is not going to be available until December. So most deadlines aren't going to be until the spring of 2024 if you're applying for August 24 admissions. So we're talking, some schools are going to say they may have a March 1st FAFSA deadline or an April 1st FAFSA deadline. So I will show you how to make sure that you are keeping track of that so that you don't miss either A, the launch date for the FAFSA, or B, the deadline for your institution. Okay, so a couple things to know about the FAFSA is that there is an online FAFSA, which is the predominant primary way in which FAFSAs are completed. There's also a PDF version of the FAFSA that you can download, and then also for ADA compliance, there is a FAFSA on the phone that you can complete as well. So you can do a FAFSA on the phone if you're unable to do the FAFSA on the web or to submit a paper FAFSA. I highly recommend using the online FAFSA, not only because of its ease and convenience, but also some of these other factors include some built-in errors to prevent, built-in edits to prevent costly errors. So when you're working on the FAFSA, if you've ever used like personal tax preparation software like TurboTax or something like that, doing the FAFSA is pretty similar to that because it's got that same sort of edit check and skip logic that will allow you to move from section to section. And that skip logic allows the student or the parent to skip unnecessary questions and move through the FAFSA more quickly. And also with the FAFSA online, there's no need to manually enter your federal tax information. You will be able to automatically connect and upload that from the IRS as you're working with the online FAFSA. So it's convenient, it's accessible, it's got error edit checks, it's got skip logic, and it connects to the IRS to automatically upload your federal tax information. A couple of other benefits is it provides more timely submission of original application and necessary corrections. You can do all of this online. Any college or university that you're applying to is going to have access to this, so they can see all of your information as soon as it's ready, and they can help you make corrections if needed. Also, there's more detailed instructions and help for common questions. The FAFSA online help section is wonderful because not only I'm speaking from experience as a financial aid administrator, but I'm also the father of 2 college students who have done the FAFSA many times. And that help and chat section is functional 24 hours a day, 365, 24/7, which is wonderful, and they are super helpful. Also, there's the ability to check application status online once you've submitted it, so you'll have full access to view your FAFSA online, as do the colleges and universities you're applying to. And then also, it's just a simplified application process because you can go back to this year over year. All right, the first thing that you need to do, and so this is one of the assignments I'm going to give you tonight. This is your takeaway. So if there's any if there's any moments during the presentation where I'm like doing this, saying here you need to really pay attention to this, this is one of those moments because this is something, dear friends, that you can do tonight. This only takes about 5 minutes, and this will help you along the way of getting your FAFSA set up. So the first thing that you want to do is to create your account username and password for your FSA ID, that's your Federal Student Aid ID, which is used for FAFSA completion and access. It's also something that the student and the parent must create in order to start your FAFSA. It can be used throughout the financial aid process, including subsequent school years. So it's what you will use as your Federal Student Aid ID. Think of this as your password when you do your FAFSA every year. And something to keep in mind, so a student's going to get an FSA ID, and any parent information, any parent who's putting their information in the FAFSA, mom, dad, stepmom, stepdad, anybody who's considered a parent, I'm using air quotes parent, is going to also create an FSA ID, but only the owner should create the FSA ID. So student, you create yours, mom, dad, you create your own separately. So to access it, you just follow this link at the bottom of the page, https://studentaid.gov/FSA-ID/create-account/launch. So you can click on that, you can take a picture of that, screenshot that, and you will get a pop-up window that looks like the box on your right that gives you instructions on how to create an account and to create your FSA ID. And again, this is your first step towards completing your FAFSA, and you can do this right now. The FSA ID username and password portal is available and live right now. You can go ahead and get started. So once you've done your FSA ID, and once we get the launch date in December, then you will be ready to launch into the Federal Student Aid website, the FAFSA. So when you get to the FAFSA website, you will be on the lookout for this little button over on the left that says 2024-25 FAFSA form, start a new form, if you are doing this for the first time. So when you do that and click into this, it'll open up a box where you'll put in your FSA ID, and then you'll indicate if you're a student or the parent working on the FAFSA. Then, as you're working through the FAFSA, you will go through a series of questions that take information on students, including some basic demographic information, and we will go into detail in this in just a little bit. But you'll get a page that gives some instructions to understand what documents you're going to need to assemble as you work on the FAFSA. So this includes making sure that you have access to your tax returns, your tax records, or your login information for the IRS, also records of child support, any current balances of cash, savings, and checking accounts, net worth of investments, business, and farms, because this is information that you're going to need to be able to input into the FAFSA as you're working through it. Okay, the Future Act Direct Data Exchange, the FADDX, allows for an individual's federal tax information to be directly transferred from the IRS into the FAFSA. So as you're working on the FAFSA and it asks information about what was your modified adjusted gross income for the most recent tax year, what was your your earning, wages, taxes, tax liability, things like that. If you don't want to manually put all that information in, you will be prompted while you're filling out the FAFSA to link to the Future Act Direct Data Exchange, where you'll just basically give consent that you are willing to have your information uploaded from the IRS directly into your FAFSA. And what it does is the IRS transfers the information to populate your FAFSA income information questions for most tax filers. And that I use air quotes because there's some folks who may not qualify to use this system, but it definitely eliminates a whole lot of manual entry of tax and income information as you're working through the FAFSA. It's really easy to use. The prior versions of this that I've used are really user-friendly, very intuitive. What happens is when you click on this, a pop-up window will come up to say, you are getting ready to enter the IRS website. Do you want to do that? You click that you give consent, and then you log in, give your information, and it'll link your information from IRS back into your FAFSA. So it takes off at least 20 or 30 minutes of data input by just transferring that information. Okay, one other final thing to mention before we talk about the sections of the FAFSA is all this time we've been discussing the FAFSA, assuming that you're going to do the online FAFSA. However, you can also do a paper FAFSA, or if you're like me and you just want to see what the FAFSA looks like before you get started, you can download a PDF FAFSA to review the questions that you'll be asked to answer on the online FAFSA for students and parents. So you can get this off the Student Aid website, and you can get the FAFSA questions both for students and for parents. So the way that the FAFSA is set up, we're going to walk through all the sections of the FAFSA one at a time. First, the FAFSA is going to ask for the student's information, including information based on your identity and contact information, also your consent for the FSI transfer from the IRS that we just looked at a minute ago. Also, it'll ask about students' marital status, their college plans, and also their personal and unusual circumstances. And so it'll break this out by category. First, it'll ask about student dependency status. So it'll ask questions like, are you a ward of the court? Are you a veteran of the armed services? Is there a child that you provide more than 50% support for? And if you answer no to these questions, then you are independent. But if you answer yes to any of those questions, then if you answer no to those questions, you are dependent. If you answer yes to any of those questions, then you are independent. So if you are a ward of the court, veteran of the armed services, you have a child for whom you provide more than 50% support for, then you will qualify as independent. But if not, then you will be dependent, and you will need to provide your parents' information on the FAFSA as you're working on that. And there'll be some intake questions to help you determine that as you log into your FAFSA and get started. There are also some unusual circumstances that you need to be aware of. Unusual circumstances include conditions that justify an institution making an adjustment to a student's dependency status, because it's not always clearly defined in those dependency questions on the FAFSA. So unusual circumstances can help determine if a student who is coded as dependent, who might qualify as independent, who may be eligible for additional aid. Students do not need to provide parental data on the FAFSA if you're considered independent or provisionally independent. And also, the student just needs to follow the institution's processes for a dependency override determination. This is where one of those other great takeaways from tonight's presentation is that if you have a question about your aid or the FAFSA, the best thing to do is to pick up the phone and call the financial aid office at the college or university from where you're applying to. We are here every day of the week, Monday through Friday, to help students and families. This is another one of those NASFA things. Every institution is here to help and support students. And we want to make sure that you have access to the kind of resources that you need and the personnel to help answer complicated questions. So any college or university that you're applying to can help answer the questions about dependency override, independent status, dependent status, unusual circumstances. So that's one of the other really important takeaways from tonight. First takeaway is to go ahead and do your FSA ID. Second takeaway is to make sure that you are comfortable reaching out and contacting colleges and universities' financial aid offices and asking for help. That's what we're here for. We love it. Okay, moving along. So we've talked about the student and those questions about dependency and demographic information and student information. Once it's determined that a student is dependent, then the student invites the parent to fill out the parent information on the FAFSA. So students and parents, as you're working on the FAFSA, you'll come across this page where the student provides personal information about the parents and their contact information to invite them to complete the parent portion of the FAFSA. So again, just to recap, the student information is going to capture some demographic information on the student, their citizenship status, their parents' education status, if a parent was killed in the line of duty as a possibility, and also high school information. The student information also will ask the students to provide tax return information if the student earned income to where that is taxable, that can be transferred from the IRS, and any other asset information, including total cost, cash savings, checking accounts, net worth, or other investments or real estate. In most cases, students don't have this information. This is going to be stuff that's supplied on the parent section. The student section completion also includes a college selection section where you indicate which colleges you want your information sent to. It also gives you a chance to review the information and then to sign your FAFSA using your FSA ID as your electronic pen that you will use to sign your FAFSA. Okay, so mom and dad, what are you expecting to see on your parent invitation for your parent section of the FAFSA? So first, you're going to receive an email from the U.S. Department of Education with an invitation to complete the parent portion of the student's FAFSA that the student did during their section. So parents must use your FSA ID, once again, to access the FAFSA to start working on your parent section. So parents, just like the students, you're going to ask to identify and verify your contact information, give consent for federal student aid to transfer your information from the IRS to upload your tax information and your income information. It'll also ask about your marital status, and it'll ask about your state of legal residence. For parents, also, you will be asked to provide receipt of any means-tested federal benefits in the previous 2 years that you may have received. Your tax filing status, your family size and number in college, your tax return information. This will help to determine your eligibility to use the data retrieval tool, the FADX tool that pulls your information from the IRS. And also it'll pull in information and you provide information about assets and any other parent information to help determine your eligibility and your student's eligibility for aid. Then on the parent section, just like the student's information, you'll get a chance to review your information for accuracy, look at a transcript of the information you provided, and then electronically sign and submit the FAFSA. So as you're working on the FAFSA, just a couple of things you might want to keep in mind as you're working through the FAFSA is that if an independent student is married, the spouse information is going to be required as well. So usually in this case, if a student indicates that they are married, they're not only going to be independent, but the student will also need to provide the spouse's income information in addition to their own information. Also, the consent to transfer FTI from the IRS is required for all contributors, including the student's spouse, if you're independent, or if you're dependent, the parents or the other parents, including step parents, if applicable, if they're determined to be a parent on the FAFSA. And then finally, students, parents, and preparers may start, complete, and submit a FAFSA. You do not have to do it all in one setting. You can start your FAFSA, you can log in work on the student section, save it, pause it, come back a couple of days later, work on it again. It does not all have to be done in one setting. You can break it up over multiple 10 or 15-minute working segments over a week or a couple of weeks or however long before you need to submit it. And that's perfectly fine. And I think that's one of the great features of the FAFSA is that you can work on it one segment at a time, discreetly in nice little chunks. You don't have to sit down and work on it all at once on one fell swoop. Just out of full disclosure, though, it will probably take about an hour to do the FAFSA for the first time. But every time that you use the online FAFSA, it saves your information so that in subsequent years when you do your FAFSA, it only really takes about 20 or 30 minutes to update your information from year to year, which makes it really convenient. Okay, just a few more slides left, folks. We're almost to the end. A few things to keep in mind as you're working on the FAFSA. We talked about earlier the difference between dependent students or dependent filers and independent filers. So dependent filers are students that also include information from the parents and the parent's spouse, the parent's dependent children, even if they live apart from the parent because of the college enrollment, and any other people if they live with the parent. So if you are a dependent filer, that's going to include yourself, the student, your parents' dependent children when it asks for things like what is your house size. So not only just who all's living there, but if there are other students in college, you want to make sure to include that too, and other people if they live with the parents. So in helping to determine family size. For independent filers, what you want to put as your family size is yourself, the student, and your spouse, or the students, including that plus any dependent children, even if they live apart from the student because of a college enrollment, and any other people if they live in the same house with the student. So when you think about family size, it isn't just your parents or you, the student, it's anybody who lives in the household with you, whether you're a dependent filer or an independent filer. So here's a couple of slides on process, just so you realize what happens when you complete the FAFSA. First, it'll go, the FAFSA, once you hit submit, it goes to the FAFSA Processing Center, that icon at the top that looks like a little Greek temple. So then after it's processed, then you, the student, and the filer will get a copy of your FAFSA results. And the colleges for which you are applying to also get a copy of the FAFSA results. I believe on this year's FAFSA, you can put up to 10 different colleges and universities that you want to receive your FAFSA results. So if you need to add new students, or excuse me, if you need to add more colleges and universities to that list, you can do that. All you have to do is log back into your FAFSA, change the number of colleges and universities, add the ones you want to submit your results to, save it, resubmit it. But you can at least start out by sending your FAFSA to at least 10 different colleges and universities. So you'll get a copy, the college and university, you'll get a copy. And so what you will get in your student summary, your FAFSA submission summary, is it'll come in 4 sections. It'll give an eligibility overview that shows what aid you qualify for. Also, it provides a FAFSA form answer, so it gives you a transcript of the information that you provided. It'll also show the school information, like a school card that shows success of retention rates and graduation rates for the schools you're applying to. And it'll also give you some handy next steps information for you to use as you are applying for aid and keeping any other deadline requirements in line for other colleges that you're applying to. And then you'll also be able to print the summary. So if you need to keep a hard copy, you can either print it as a hard copy, or you can save it as a PDF and save it as a file somewhere. But you can always go back to your aid summary, and this will all come to you in the form of an email. I'm going to skip through the paper FAFSA submission summary because this will come in the email that you receive, and it's just basically a transcript of the submissions that you received in your email. But you can print this out as a paper copy form, and again, save this as a separate file as a hard copy. Colleges and universities receive something similar to the summary that's called an Institutional Student Information Record, also known as an ISIR, I-S-I-R. And what this does is the Financial Aid Processing Center sends these results to colleges and universities listed on the FAFSA. So again, that list of 10 colleges or universities, each one of these will get a copy of your Institutional Student Information Record. And then colleges review the ISIRs and determine your eligibility for aid, and they may request additional documentation if they need to verify anything. Sometimes students are asked to complete something called a verification worksheet just to verify some information that colleges and universities need to need to document or verify when they're reviewing your eligibility for aid. So then the last couple of slides here, if you need to make any corrections to the FAFSA once you've submitted it, you can either do that by logging back into the FAFSA online or updating the paper FAFSA. Most people don't use paper FAFSAs anymore. Or you can reach out to your college or university's financial aid office, and we can actually make those corrections for you on your behalf. So, and a lot of times it's easier if you just call us who work in financial aid offices. We will be happy to make those changes for you so that you don't have to go back online. And when we make the changes, it'll make it for any other college or university that you've applied to as well. So we are happy to do that. So again, that second takeaway, make sure that you feel comfortable reaching out to financial aid offices. All right, a few notes on special circumstances. Just like we talked about unusual circumstances before that determine dependency overrides, the unique special circumstances are unique conditions that exist that cannot be documented within the FAFSA, or circumstances that may have changed from the time that you filed your FAFSA. If you think you have a special circumstance, please contact your institutional financial aid office for more information. We can help you, and we can help to do professional judgment overrides. Professional judgment overrides and to submit any appeals on your behalf. However, if an appeal is declined by the U.S. Department of Education, decisions are final and cannot be appealed if the U.S. Department of Education declines an appeal. So some of these factors are things that count as special circumstances. And I'll just let you read this screen here for a moment. So special circumstances, reading from left to right, may include the parent or spouse death. Sometimes when students, unfortunately this happens, the student completes the FAFSA, includes their parent information, and in the course of the student completing the FAFSA and financially being packaged, mom and dad may pass away. That's an unusual special circumstance. Also, any unusual uncovered medical or dental expenses that aren't covered by insurance can also count as a special circumstance, which can reduce your income and therefore make you eligible for more aid. Also, something that we've seen frequently, certainly since the beginning of the pandemic, is the loss of employment or income. So let's say you submit your FAFSA, you report your income based on what you were earning, and then mom or dad may lose a job, be laid off, furloughed, whatever. So that needs to be reported on a FAFSA. Also, any extraordinary dependent care, either for special needs children or for aging parents, can be special circumstances. Also, divorce. In the time where a student submits a FAFSA and includes parents' information as married, a divorce can change the circumstances and a factor on a FAFSA that need to be reported. Also, any secondary school tuition or private school tuition paid for parents on behalf of another child can be a special circumstance. And also, any additional family members in college can count as a special circumstance. So if you have multiple children in college, again, the FAFSA is trying to figure out how much a family can send one member of the family to college for 1 year. But of course, that needs to be broken out if you have multiple family members in college. So with that, friends, that concludes our FAFSA presentation. And again, on behalf of the National Association of Student Financial Aid Administrators, I really appreciate your time and attention during this presentation, and look forward to sharing this slide deck along with some of the other materials for you. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and see if we have any questions or concerns from our folks in the audience.
Mr. Miller, just one more time, I want to thank you for sharing this information with us. This has been it's very detailed, which I think is absolutely necessary at this point in time with all the changes that are happening. From your perspective, what would be the most important thing for families to do during this financial aid cycle?
That's a great question, Mr. Young. You know, as we're waiting for the FAFSA to launch in December, and trust me, all of us in financial aid, we're still waiting for that launch date to come from the U.S. Department of Education. It's guaranteed to launch in December. So here are the things I would recommend families do now. First thing is go ahead and complete that FSA ID piece, because that is your first step in not only accessing the FAFSA. So again, anybody whose information is going on the FAFSA for family, the student, mom, dad, anybody who's putting information on a FAFSA, go ahead and do that FSA ID. And as I said, you can actually do that tonight. It only takes about 5 to 10 minutes to go online, log on, and do it. And everybody's going to need an FSA ID. So again, student, mom, dad, you're going to need that information. The second thing is I would go ahead and start collecting some of those materials because the FAFSA is going to ask students and families to report their earnings off of the tax returns that you've already done this year. So it's not expecting you to do your taxes like in 24 for 23. It's taking the income taxes that you've already completed for 22, and that's what you're going to report on your FAFSA for this upcoming year. So go ahead and assemble all that or pull together your passwords and your login information, because here's something to keep in mind. If you're using that DDX tool that transfers your information from the IRS into your FAFSA, you want to make sure that you're inputting your password information exactly as it is and the way that your contact information appears on your IRS statement. So for example, if you live at 123 Brown Street and you wrote that out, 123 Brown, STREET, and then if you're, whenever you sign into the IRS, it's going to ask you to verify your information. If you put 123 Brown, ST period, it's going to say there's no match and we can't identify you. So you want to make sure that you log your information in exactly the same way that reports or that you report it on the IRS, because that's how it's going to verify. It's going to ask for your name, your address, your social, and your date of birth. So make sure that you're pulling that information so that it can match your information through the IRS. So that's the second thing. And then the third takeaway is, like I mentioned before, go ahead and start reaching out to the financial aid offices at colleges and universities for which you are applying or think about applying. And just go ahead and say, I'm applying for admission as a freshman for fall 24. I realize the FAFSA is not available yet. I may not even have an offer of admission yet, but I just want to see, are there any upcoming deadlines that your offices are working around that I might need to be aware of as a student that's applying for admission to your school or university? Most universities and colleges are going to be pretty flexible this year just because we realize the FAFSA is coming in a little late. So some of those deadlines that may have been there in the past of like February 1st or March 1st are probably going to get pushed down a couple of months just to give families and students some additional time to get all their information in. But outside of those three takeaways, doing the FSA ID, collecting your information, especially your IRS and tax information, and then go ahead and reaching out to your financial aid offices and your admissions offices. Those are the three best things I would recommend to kind of position you to get ready for this FAFSA cycle.
I love that, especially with the first two, because it sounds like to me, take care of the easy stuff. Take care of the very simple things, because a lot of this process can get it can be very hard. It can be difficult. So while you can, take care of the little simple things first. That way you have more attention that you can spend on everything else.
That's right. Great insight. Great insight. Right. Just the best way to get stuff done is to get it done.
That's
And
it.
especially when
Yes,
it's easy.
sir. Well, once again, Mr. Miller, we thank you very much for your time and sharing this information with us. Students, if you have any questions, feel free to contact me. I'll do my best. And if not, I know Mr. Miller down the street at Winthrop can help us out. You all have a great evening, and we'll see y'all next time. Bye bye.